It's international break and you know what that means. The TV goes off. No, I'm joking. I don't even own a TV in my new place yet. So my PC goes off. Thomas Tuchel has chosen his first England squad as new manager. And it features the usual stars like Harry Kane, Jude Bellingham, Cole Palmer, a couple of new boys like Dan Burn and Morgan Rogers, has-beens like Jordan Henderson, and some youthful exuberance in the form of Arsenal left-back Myles Lewis-Skelly. And I'm sure this inclusion has had a totally normal reaction. To be honest, I don't know why I just don't like him. Not racist, but I just can't tell myself. Can't stand him already, just gonna be another player with a shit attitude just like many before him. Nobody actually cares about the game anymore. I can't stand his main character syndrome, massive. So, you know, a normal reaction. Lots of people are defending him, lots of people are angry at him. So, why do people dislike Myles Lewis-Skelly already? I'll give you 3 guesses. Jordan Henderson got in the squad aged 53, by the way, and that's not the most controversial thing about this team. Tuchel will be chasing Jordan down the road when he lumps another long ball directly out of play instead of playing an easy pass to Anthony Gordon. At least we managed to bully him into actually picking Morgan Gibbs-White from Nottingham Forest after the original snub, now included in the team after Cole Palmer's slight injury. And speaking of bullying, there's been quite a lot of discourse this week about one particular individual when it comes to this team being chosen. Now, if we cut to this picture, standalone, what do we see? Well, we see an 18-year-old kid who's just performing in a breakthrough season for one of the best teams in the country and has just managed to get himself an England senior squad call-up already. Bro bypassed the under-21s completely and waved at Harvey Elliott on the way by. This guy's in the Lee Carsley Penitentiary. He looks gassed, all right? He looks excited. He's wearing a wavy jacket, in my opinion, but I know some people don't rate it. But either way, all is well. No? Well, some people see it very differently indeed. To be honest, I don't know why I don't like him. I'm not racist, but I just can't tell myself. You can't tell why you don't like him. Interesting. One man here appears to be upset with him for clashing with Chelsea manager Enzo Maresca. That was Jurriën Timber. Fucking hell, these guys are stupid, bro. I'm not asked that he's 18. He's so fucking chinnable. Now, aside from the foolishness that's going on in these tweets, yeah, just like as a side note, chinnable is such a funny word, isn't it? But anyway, back to the actual action. Based on what I said in the intro in terms of the examples and some more of the examples there in terms of these tweets, a lot of people have a lot to say about Myles Lewis-Skelly, though none of them seem to actually be talking about him from a football perspective. If he shouldn't be in the team, then who should be replacing him? I mean, Luke Shaw we might as well give a retirement plan to at this point. Ben Chilwell's kind of fallen off the face of the earth for England in terms of performances. I'd say Lewis Hall deserves to be starting for England, but he's injured at the moment. So realistically, after that, you're looking at Myles Lewis-Skelly. I think the guy's been really, really good for Arsenal this season. As an 18-year-old, I think he's pretty level-headed out on the pitch. We'll get on to some of the things that have happened and reasons why people don't call him level-headed. But if you actually watch him week in, week out, then you'll know that he is pretty calm out there. And then also there's Jed Spence, who's traditionally a right back, but has been playing out on the left for Tottenham. I think he's been superb as well. And he's definitely unlucky not to get a call-up. And overall, it's worth remembering what this tweet, what this picture actually is. It's just him turning up for international duty. Like, he's not actually doing anything. It's not like a video where he's bad-mouthing someone or looking upset or looking, I don't know, like he's gonna punch someone in the face. The kid's just happy, excited, looks like he's ready to, you know, represent his country for the first time at senior level. So there must be some sort of other media that he's been involved in, like a really sort of outrageous, outlandish video that...
Who is it? How you doing? What's your message to the next player that arrives?
Hope you arrive here safe.
Yeah, portrays him as unlikable. Now he seems really well mannered in this, you know, nice and sweet, you know, just talking to the England social media admin there and hoping that everyone gets to the game safely. So there must be something else, like on top of that, you know, like him taking the piss out of his own height.
Nah, this is too much. This is too much. Look at this.
Whilst he's standing next to Dan Burn, which makes him seem pretty relatable and able to actually take the piss out of himself. Okay, so clearly he's not done anything on international duty then. Like, realistically, that on top of this picture would indicate people being annoyed at him. So let's investigate a little bit further. Let's talk about his domestic campaign and his breakthrough season. They burst onto the scene, Micah Richards style this campaign, and immediately burst into the referee's notebook. Yeah, Myles Lewis-Skelly actually kind of went viral for the first time in his career by getting booked before he'd actually even made his full senior debut. I think he got involved in an argument that was happening down on the touchline, got given a yellow card, and it was seen as like some crazy statistic, which it kind of is. I don't think anyone's ever done that before. But then really burst onto the scene outside of his performances for Arsenal, which were really strong, when Arsenal faced off against Manchester City at the start of the season. Now, mid-Humblegate, Mikel Arteta versus Erling Haaland, there's an interaction between a Norwegian striker and Myles Lewis-Skelly, where he asks, who the fuck is he? Man City players and Arsenal players were going at it in equal measure, and Haaland asks, who the fuck are you? To Myles Lewis-Skelly. Now, he definitely knows who Myles is in this situation. Manchester City are meticulous, I assume, in their research of players and in their analysis, otherwise they wouldn't be as successful as they are. Pep Guardiola is meticulous. He counts the amount of hairs that are on his chin. Now, I know for one thing, thing, he doesn't count the amount of hairs that are on the top of his head.
No hair will ever grow on his head again.
That's true.
Now, unless Erling Haaland managed to miss this pre-match meeting whilst out hunting wild boars, he's quite obviously saying this to Myles in order to take the piss, in order to belittle him because he's someone that hasn't achieved much in his senior career because he's only just broke into the first team having played at Hale End's academy. It's a little dig at a player that hasn't achieved anything as of yet because he's just a child still. Now, when you do this in the game of football, I guess in real life as well, but mostly in football, when you add a little spice of shithousery into the mix at a certain player, you can probably expect them to give it back to you the next time you played them. This season alone, we've had the storylines of Adama Traore versus Lisandro Martinez. You had Neil Maupay versus James Maddison last season for Tottenham and Brentford, and in a much more extreme case, you had Roy Keane and Erling Haaland's own father, Alfie, back in the late 90s and early 2000s. You give a little bit of banter or a big challenge, and you're probably going to receive one in return the next time you play each other now in the age of social media. So when Arsenal then came back to play Manchester City for the second time this season in the reverse fixture, absolutely peppered Manchester City, and Myles Lewis-Skelly scored, and then dropped Erling Haaland's celebration on his forehead, it was fair to say the Norwegian knew who he was at this point.
A bit shit, but that's all it is.
Now again, this is very normal back and forth in the world of football. If you play football, if you give it large to someone out on the pitch and then they score, they're going to celebrate in front of you. All the way through the footballing pyramid, this is what happens. If you can't hack that, if that offends you, if it gives you a negative connotation of a player reacting for something that somebody else started, then football probably isn't for you. And this is worth remembering as well. Erling Haaland started this, okay? You know, when it comes to the Myles Lewis-Skelly celebration storyline, he started that by saying that to Lewis-Skelly. I don't think that celebration happens if he doesn't violate him in front of millions of people live on television. Erling Haaland has all my respect. I don't respect him less for the fact that he started beefing Mikel Arteta, Gabriel Jesus and Lewis-Skelly. It's part of football, it's part of competitive sport, but to then blame the person who was victimized the first time in the beef for then reacting and responding is really bizarre when it was Haaland that kind of started all of that, I guess. I mean, you could trace it back to Gabriel starting it maybe, but either way, in terms of the beef between Haaland and Lewis-Skelly, very much the Norwegian who put his first foot forward. There's been mixed vibes for Lewis-Skelly since then. He's picked up 2 red cards in like 12 games, which is not a great record, but he's also played really, really well. He's looked really, really confident on the ball. He looks great going forward. I mean, he's not traditionally a left back in his youth days anyway, so he's naturally going to look good going forward. He's managed to displace Ricardo Calafiori pretty easily in that team, and overall, you bank him to be on the starting 11 sheet pretty much every game now, if he's not suspended. But again, it doesn't really explain this visceral reaction. I mean, one element of shithousery, you could argue he was giving it large to Spurs fans when he got substituted off in a North London derby at the start of the season, but even still, we've seen plenty of players do that. Remember Kevin De Bruyne kicking a cup or like throwing a cup back at Arsenal fans when he got substituted? Very simple stuff. It happens all the time. What, are we beefing him because he stole a celebration one time? Plenty of players do that and we'll come to them. No, look, don't get it twisted. I'm sure Erling Haaland will have something to say to Lewis-Skelly the next time they play. He'll have the whole cast of iRobot turning up to the Emirates to beef him and Arteta. But either way, as I said, we see players steal each other's celebrations all the time. It's like #1 bullet point in the shithousery book chapter 1. So for me, with people getting at him at that, I think that's totally, misfounded. I don't understand. I don't think that's a viable reason to have a dislike for him. Genuinely, we see that more than enough from other players that don't get the same reaction like this. So let's move on to the second argument, which is people calling him a thug for getting 2 red cards in 12 games. Now, as I said before, that is a horrible record. Referees are already reaching into their front pocket when they see him step onto the pitch. If I'm Gabriel, I'm taking out the linesman as soon as he flags for a minor inconvenience that Lewis-Skelly's caused on the halfway line. But let's look into these red cards in a little bit more detail because the context is important. So the first one versus Wolves. Now, I don't think we need to say all that much beyond this is one of the, and universally agreed, one of the worst decisions that a referee has made in like the last 5 years. I've talked about Michael Oliver in great detail on this channel before. I've talked about this decision in great detail, but it was overturned almost immediately, so we can pretty much just forget about it as a red card. I know statistically it's going to show up and it's a blot on Lewis-Skelly's copybook, but it basically doesn't exist. It wasn't a red card. It was deemed not to be a red card by an official body, and pretty much everyone was just about as outraged when seeing it live that it was given as a straight red. So now we move on to the West Ham one, which absolutely was a red card, but it was a last man challenge where he's basically dragged someone to the floor after making a mistake. Now, the mistake is peak, that's on him. Dragging the player down is on him, but it's not reckless, it's not dangerous, and it's certainly not thuggish. It's just a red card in the laws and the rules of football. So we've got 2 red cards there in 12 games that don't don't indicate really any sort of violent conduct, no sort of criminal record when it comes to bad challenges in his youth career either. So I think we can pretty much conclude that that reason for people disliking him isn't really viable either, because he's not actually done anything to indicate in terms of violent conduct that he is a thug or that he's a particularly dirty player. Again, I said at the start of the video, when you actually watch him, he's actually very level-headed, he's very calm, maybe a little bit emotional in games where there's a lot of stake, like a North London derby or against Manchester City, but I don't mean a bad emotional, I mean he's just riling people up just a little bit, but everyone does that in games like that. No one's getting onto like Gabriel for doing the same thing. And third and finally, we've got the talk and the angle that some people are taking that he's got an attitude problem. And this is where people that are tweeting about him negatively are gonna get their feelings hurt, because this one undoubtedly is problematic. Attitude problem. We've heard this so many times with players playing for England internationally. Marcus Rashford, Jude Bellingham, Dele Alli, Raheem Sterling off the top of my head, Myles Lewis-Skelly now, and the list kind of just goes on and goes on. Some players do have an attitude problem, and that extends beyond race, which is what I'm going to get onto here. I think a lot of people have got Jadon Sancho during his time for having an attitude problem, and that's one that I probably agree with. I think he's gone to a lot of different places now and had a lot of the same sorts of problems. I don't think he handled himself the best that he could have done during the Ten Hag situation. No, I don't think Ten Hag did as well. Vice versa, but I think he is one that you could maybe argue. And again, outside of ethnicity, whatever, there's plenty of white players that have also wasted potential based on not really having the impetus or the actual work ethic to make football their full career. But let's put that aside for a second and just look at Myles Lewis-Skelly just singularly. What evidence do we actually have to suggest that he has like a bad attitude? Is there any? Has anyone actually met him? Sorry, this is a bit of a rant at this point in this video, but it has to actually be said because it's just stupidness. People are just saying stuff for the sake of it. I'm gonna break this down, okay, for the people that are still skeptical yet. This kid is thriving at a team that is managed by possibly the biggest vibes terrorist, the biggest dictator in the league. Even look at Prism Brighton for longer than 3 seconds, that man's got you out of the door. It doesn't matter who you are. In the early days of managing at Arsenal, Mikel Arteta made a real big example of players who weren't putting in enough effort or, generally speaking, had an attitude problem, okay? We're looking at Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, the actual captain and talisman of Arsenal at the time. Now, I know his performances started to drop off a little bit in the final year at Arsenal that Aubameyang was there and playing, but either way, he was still the captain and probably top of the hierarchy or top 3 of the hierarchy at the entire club in terms of the playing staff. So Mikel Arteta saw that his attitude wasn't good enough, got him out of there. That is the most important player at the club at the time. We're not talking about a youth graduate, we're talking about the captain of Arsenal Football Club. So what actually makes you think that Myles Lewis-Skelly, an 18-year-old who's just come out of Arsenal's youth academy, that has no God-given right to actually play for Arsenal whatsoever, with an attitude problem, is going to break into that starting 11 and thrive? Not a chance, mate. Mikel Arteta would not allow it. It's as simple as that, and what I'm finding is confidence is often misconstrued and misportrayed as arrogance when it comes to a certain demographic of football, okay? I know there's going to be people that go, oh, he's pulling that card. I'm just looking at facts, guys. Genuinely, this happens over and over again to players that are proven to be either consummate professionals or actually good people. We had it with Raheem Sterling because he had a slightly questionable tattoo. Gone on to play, I don't know how many caps, Raheem. Shall we Google it? Raheem Sterling has 82 caps for England, and I think he's going to go down as one of the most underrated players of the English generation because of the players that he was playing around. This guy won everything there was to win, apart from he missed out on the Champions League at Manchester City, for a consistent period of time in one of the most dominant teams in English history, recent Premier League history, was a key player in that team. Raheem Sterling is a baller and has always looked like a professional, but because he had a tattoo as a youngster and he's got a few kids, suddenly he's not, he's got an attitude problem. Marcus Rashford did so much for NHS professionals during lockdown and helped millions of like starving kids get free lunch meals, free like dinner at their schools over like a 3-year period, took politicians to task, did like a really good job of like actually trying to change his local area off the pitch as a man rather than just as a footballer. And yes, I know he's had a falling out with Ruben Amorim. That's not ideal. He's been frozen out by the manager, but it happens all the time. You know, every time a new manager comes in, he freezes someone out of the team. You know, off the top of my head, purely because I saw a tweet about it about 6 minutes ago, Steve Bruce arrived at Newcastle and he didn't rate Fabian Schär. And now Fabian Schär has just won the Carabao Cup, regrettably, against my team, Liverpool, under Eddie Howe. Forgot what his name was there for a second. It happens. Certain players don't fit in with a style. If he doesn't work enough as a wide man to work for Ruben Amorim's system, then say less. He's not going to be in his plans. But he's gone to Aston Villa. He's kept his head down. He's kept it professional and he's performing for them. But somehow had an attitude problem, even before the Amorim stuff happened. Dele Alli literally went through horrific childhood trauma, opened up about it, clearly had gone through devastating mental health issues, but had an attitude problem. Myles Lewis-Skelly, fuck knows what he's even actually done, but he apparently has an attitude problem. Look, listen, Jude Bellingham, yeah, has been seen as like the biggest PR machine according to Twitter for like a couple of years now, okay? He's meant to be squeaky clean, whatever. A year ago, the Daily Mail were posting about him having a god complex, yeah. This is a guy who's not been involved in any controversy in his life. He's actually attempting, quite obviously, to have the cleanest PR record of all time, and he's still getting slandered in the media and the press. You honestly can't win. Phil Foden might have about 8 children at this point, okay? Imagine he was a black footballer. The headlines would be very different, as has been the case with Raheem Sterling in the past. In fact, we don't have to imagine, because we actually have a brilliant example where Phil Foden, as a youngster, bought a house for his mum, and he was lauded by the Daily Mail for doing so. Very rightfully, by the way. That's fucking amazing. Being a youth graduate, you've just broken into Manchester City's first team, and you're buying a house for your mum. That is gas. Shout out Phil Foden. He should be celebrated for that. That's amazing. And he was celebrated for it. Now, same year, another Manchester City youth graduate who now plays for Chelsea, obviously, Tosin Adarabioyo, does the exact same thing, buys a house for his mum, and it's spun to be a negative thing. But he's splashing out flashy new car or like a new home that he shouldn't be able to afford because he's only a lowly youth academy player. This has been going on for time. And again, I encourage people, by the way, before they comment on this, I know we're like, I don't know, 80% of the way through this video now, but I do encourage people to think first of all before they comment on this one, and also watch it to the end, because, I mean, I should have said this at the start. Maybe, fuck it, whatever, it's too late now. But I'm not saying that white players don't get abused. That's not what I'm trying to say here. People like Declan Rice have been getting it in the neck at times. Phil Foden, Jack Grealish, okay, they were lynching effigies of David Beckham back in the day, okay? A newspaper that shall never be named on this channel were selling dartboards with David Beckham's face on them. Now, none of this is acceptable. None of this is correct. You shouldn't be abusing any footballer over the game of football about anything. But largely, maybe with the exception of David Beckham at times, yeah, it was mostly to do with what was happening on the pitch. Most of the David Beckham fallout came because of his red card against Argentina. In terms of Phil Foden, it's performance-based because of the Euros. In terms of Declan Rice, usually performance-based. And in terms of Jack Grealish, again, performance-based / him drinking a little bit too much. But even then, that doesn't get as much attention in my eyes as maybe it should. I made a video on Jack Grealish and the fact that I think he should remain unapologetically himself, but also kind of highlighting the fact that he does get seen in compromising situations quite a lot and maintains this Jack the Lad personality, which I don't mind, but I don't think necessarily other players get that same treatment. No one's saying that Phil Foden's got an attitude problem. They're just annoyed at him for dropping 6.2s on SofaScore. That's the difference compared to black young players I've found. I feel like when it comes to, and this again, you know, feel free to prove me wrong, but in terms of the case studies that I have provided in this video and the examples and research that I found, is that generally speaking, almost immediately, we're going at a player's personality, we're gunning at who they are as a person rather than what they're doing out on the pitch. As I said at the start, not many people, anyway, are saying that Myles Lewis-Skelly shouldn't be picked for England because he's not performed well enough for Arsenal. Almost entirely and exclusively, people are saying that he's a dickhead, he's got like an attitude problem, he's a little bit too cocky or arrogant. That is a person's actual fundamentals. That's not what they're doing as a footballer. That's just attacking them as people. I mean, name me 5 white players in the history of England, like as a national team, where the media or where people's general consensus is he's got an attitude problem. We're not looking at many. Genuinely, I'm gonna be honest, I don't actually think you can. Certainly, let's talk modern history. Let's say even last 30 years. Probably Paul Gascoigne. Is that even the last 30 years? Yeah, I'm less than 30. Yeah, 30 years. We're looking at Paul Gascoigne, maybe Jack Grealish, but often not. They still see him as a professional even though he drinks quite a lot. You know what, actually, let's even forget about like outside of just the current England squad and that as a perspective, okay? Let's look at Jamie Vardy and Neil Maupay. These guys are often lauded for their shithousery, okay? Even on official pages, I think the Premier League's official Twitter actually was, you know, talking about how amazing it is, like top 10 moments where Jamie Vardy and Neil Maupay have rattled their opponents. And that's rightfully, in my opinion. I think they miss the mark sometimes in some of the things that they say or do, but I think the game of football needs that little bit of spice, that little bit of shithousery. It's a good thing, guys. Genuinely, I like it. But that same Premier League account then used different language when describing Myles Lewis-Skelly's celebration where he stole Erling Haaland's. And what do these accounts that are posting about Lewis-Skelly at the moment, you know, the ones that are raging, that think he's got a punchable face or whatever, or think he's got main character syndrome, I mean, what are we talking about here? What do those accounts think of Jamie Vardy? What do those accounts think of of Neil Maupay. Maybe they think the exact same thing, or no, maybe they like them. Maybe they actually like what they do and they think they're great shithouses. So yeah, man, I guess it's open to interpretation, isn't it? Now, for what it's worth, yeah, in conclusion, okay, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt here, okay? I'm not trying to say that the people that are posting these tweets, all the people anyway, that are having this visceral reaction about Myles Lewis-Skelly are running down the street shouting slurs at everybody on the tube. I don't actually think that's happening. I don't think that's the type of people that we're talking about here. In some instances, I definitely think there is a lot of that going on, but I don't think I'm not like actually trying to put everyone who has a bad word to say about Myles Lewis-Skelly into the raging racist file book. Yeah, if we've got like a folder of racismo, page 1 is like the real racismos, okay? We've got Luis Suarez maybe at the top. These guys are closer to the glossary, but there's just that little edge. It's that edge where they'll see like a confident black person and be a little bit annoyed, a little bit irked, and they don't even notice it. They don't know they're doing it. They don't know why they would be doing it. They don't think they're doing it, but they are. And that's like a perpetuated wider societal issue that's then being highlighted onto football as like a test subject as well. And that's largely from the media. People like the Daily Mail talking about Jude Bellingham having a god complex, or Myles Lewis-Skelly and the way that he was portraying himself in the beef with Erling Haaland, or Raheem Sterling's tattoo, or Marcus Rashford being on a late night out in Belfast compared to their coverage of Jack Grealish being on a late night out in Manchester. But either way, it needs tackling, whatever the source is, just not as the last man, Myles. Ideally, we don't want you getting I don't want to give them any more ammunition, do you know what I mean? Anyway, I hope I've debunked some theories about Myles and backed him a little bit. Again, I don't really know where this reaction has come from. It's quite bizarre, to be honest with you. If you disagreed at the start, you've seen the light by this point. Honestly, even let's remove any societal stuff and any wider issues of race from it. It's just very strange to look at an 18-year-old who's getting his first England call-up and he looks really happy in a picture and he's smiling and laughing in videos with the rest of the squad and tear him down for it. It's just really odd behavior, especially when there's basically no reason for you to hate him in terms of a rational reason anyway. But what do you make of the discourse around Myles Lewis-Skelly? Because I think it's been very strange. Either way, if you did enjoy this video, slap a like on it. You don't have to, it's fine. But subscribe if you're new to the channel. Would really appreciate it. And just be good people, man. That's it. I'm not asking the world. Just see an 18-year-old happy for getting an England call-up and like be happy for him. Maybe, man. That's it. Fucking hell.